Hello guys and welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to take a step back and talk about my first custom keyboard ever. Like many of you, my first build was a Tofu 60 by KBD Fans, which I discovered in April 2021 via Optimum Tech's channel, one of my favorite tech YouTubers, which I was following already for a while. So he made a video about his first custom keyboard, a concept completely new to me, although mechanical keyboards weren't, since I had been using several for a while, mostly from Razer. And, well, I was blown away. His Tofu 60 was the best keyboard I had ever heard or seen. So I jumped on the bandwagon, knowing little to nothing about customs, and ordered mine, pre-lubed and pre-built of course. The specs were the exact same as his, with Tealios switches, because at the time I wasn't even able to conceive that something better could exist. But shortly after, I fell into the rabbit hole, exposing myself to the ever-expanding and marvelous world of customs, getting my hands on exquisite boards such as the Fjell, the 265 Keycult, the Austin, the Mr. Suit, the Windex, and much more. And the funny thing is, initially I wanted to talk about the Tofu 60 in a review format, expecting to underline just how much better all the other customs I own are in comparison. But after spending a few days again with it, and trying to put myself in the shoes of someone discovering a custom keyboard for the first time, I realized that actually, no, the Tofu 60 is not a bad or average keyboard. In fact, it's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a Tofu 60, and there is nothing wrong with being satisfied by it. Could I find an objective criteria to say why a Keycult is a better keyboard than a Tofu 60? Well, yes, I probably could if I tried, but not in such dramatic proportions that would lead me to say a Tofu 60 is bad and a Keycult is great. I guess what I'm trying to say is that in mainstream retail, budget often means worse, or less performing, or less durable, or with less features, but not in the world of customs. In my view, in the world of customs, budget doesn't necessarily mean worse, but simply more accessible, less complex, with materials that are cheaper, therefore easier to manufacture. Not to mention, I feel we should go back to the basics. The purpose of a custom keyboard is to be customizable, and the Tofu 60 fills that definition perfectly. You can enter the marvelous world of keyboard customization with a Tofu 60. What I mean is, the Tofu 60 isn't worse than a Keycult at swapping and mixing your favorite keycap sets. It isn't worse at changing the switches so that you can try a massive array of typing feels and sound. It has a huge community that puts out guides on how to make it sound and feel to your liking, with or without mods. In other words, the Tofu 60 allows you to take part in the hobby like any other owner of a so-called Grail keyboard. I think it's important not to forget this. In that regard, the Tofu 60 is a great custom keyboard. Let's also remember that, as enthusiasts, it's easy to get lost in details and make them stand out as things that are massively important. Simply because our heads are buried so deep in the hobby, we can't see that most of our tastes are dominated by diminishing returns. I'm not saying that the custom market is completely randomized and that there are no rational reasons for one keyboard to be more sought or more expensive than another. Just that if we were to give a blind sound test to someone that has never touched a custom keyboard, he probably wouldn't be able to say which of a Tofu or a Keycult is the more expensive one. In many ways, our hobby is very much about what some call acquired taste, and I think it's always good to sometimes take a step back to reflect on this as we entrench ourselves further in the rabbit hole, not only to judge the Tofu lineup, but also to re-evaluate our taste and what we really are looking for in a custom. Speaking of sound test, here is what mine sounds like. So with all I said previously in mind, what's my opinion on the sound test? Well, I think it sounds good. Is it a bit pingy and hollow? Yes. Is it a bit dull compared to some of the other customs I own? Yes. But so what? I mean, how much should one care about it? The only thing I think needs to be pointed out is that ever since April 2021, the budget market exploded, with tons of great options, some even less expensive than the tofu, depending on where you live, making it a bit less relevant, simply because there are so many more viable choices to fit your preferences. Honestly, I'd say the worst part of this board are the switches. The only word that comes to mind when I think about Tealios is boring. Are they smooth? Well, yeah. But again, which linear really isn't? Do they sound bad? No, but they lack character in my opinion. There is nothing wrong, but also nothing special. No charm to them. In the end, I have no intention of buying another batch again. Unlike other switches, I've stacked for several builds, and that's a clear sign of what they are worth to you. And that's a bummer for a switch that at the time was one of the most expensive new stock switches at $1 per switch. Now you've also maybe noticed that some of the letters are crooked and not perfectly in place. That's mainly because my plate has bent. I've not had this issue with other boards, so it could be the quality of the plate. But it could also very well just be me, not being careful enough pulling out switches, which is hard in my experience on the tofu, or lacking experience as a first timer. Many other people have tofus and don't have this issue. So yeah, that's going to be all in this video. A reminder to keep a fresh mind and outlook on our passion for keyboards, and remember where we all started, and more importantly, why we started. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification button. As you can see, I've started creating content, and each of those has a huge impact for me. Thanks again, and see you all soon in the next one.